Good Wednesday evening, folks. Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandages here with an update on Hurricane Francine that made landfall earlier this evening in Louisiana as a Category 2 hurricane. Here's a loop of radar over the last 3 hours, local radar out of Hammond, Louisiana. Landfall southwest of Morgan City, again as a Category 2 hurricane, 100-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Strongest it's been throughout its entire lifetime was right up through around landfall. And you can see it here with the northern eye wall was the area where it likely had the strongest of the winds, most likely occurrence of those winds up to 100 miles per hour or so. It has now moved inland, and the flash flooding threat, the tornado threat is still present, and we've got widespread power outages as well. Here's a look at satellite imagery. The infrared is showing a loop of the last 12 hours or so. And it peaked at 100 miles per hour, which put it as a Category 2 hurricane, now down to 85 miles per hour. So it's away from its fuel source, the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. But there's something interesting about landfalling storms in Louisiana. We saw this back with Ida back in 21, is that after landfall, it didn't really weaken as quickly. Not saying that that's what's happening here, but if it's going to happen anywhere, it's along the Gulf Coast because it's something called the brown ocean effect. And you got a lot of swamps here, a lot of bayous, a lot of water areas, and swamps and marsh. They hold the heat. So even though you're away from the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico, you still have that heating element available to provide energy to these storms. Even after they make landfall, they can sustain themselves a little while longer than they otherwise would, say, making landfall anywhere else. So that's something interesting here with landfalling storms in Louisiana. I also want to show you something here that it was a game of cat and mouse, really, with wind shear and dry air catching up to Francine. Here's an 18-hour loop of water vapor imagery. We've been visiting this image the last couple of days in our analysis. And here's the dry air, very dry air in central and south Texas. We also have increasing wind shear aloft from the west. And what that's doing is, as you can see here, it's eating away at Francine on its western periphery as we go out in time. So that dry air is intruding on the system, and it just didn't catch it in time to really weaken it right before it made landfall. Now it is certainly doing a number on it and eating away at its moisture shield off to the south. Regardless, we had a landfalling hurricane, the third of the season, and the third in the Gulf of Mexico just in 2024, up through 9/11. And this is the most landfalling storms through this date since 2020. It's been very active, but thankfully they've been lower grade hurricanes. Not to say the impacts aren't there, because certainly we saw Beryl cause a lot of issues in southeast Texas, Francine causing issues at this time, and Debbie up along the panhandle of Florida. Let's look at winds now. These are observed wind gusts, and you'll notice a stark comparison to the strong, really strong winds, 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts here, recorded at some of the buoys well offshore. And then we've got METAR sites that recorded inland wind gusts. Big difference. So why the difference? Well, over the open waters, you have the reduction of friction. Winds are much stronger over the open water, and then you introduce the land, the frictional component, and it does slow the winds down. So peak wind gusts so far out at New Orleans at 62, Patterson also 62, but East Cameron buoy over here, 105-mile-per-hour wind gust, as the system was really ramping on up just ahead of landfall there. So here's the track going forward, moving to the north, weakening quickly as it does so, moving almost due north here up along the spine of the Mississippi River, and then eventually becoming a remnant low south of St. Louis later in the week. Elsewhere in the basin, yeah, there's a lot more going on. We've got 3 other waves that we're watching right now, all of which are painted yellow, meaning the odds of them developing are low. Highest risk is the one here that may develop off the southeast coast of the U.S., 30% chance there. And hey, guess what? Aside from this, we also have a brand new tropical depression. That's number 7 here. This is forecast to become Gordon, the 7th named storm within the next 12 hours probably. But it does stay out in the open Atlantic, not going to be an impact to anybody. You see the spaghetti plots on it here, kind of takes it due west, northwest, and then moves it north and sits and spins in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, not impacting anybody aside from maritime travel across the Atlantic over the next 7 days or so. So that's the good news. Let's talk a little bit more about the other wave that may be developing off the southeast coast of the U.S. This is primed for a 30% chance of tropical development over the next 7 days, although I will tell you the latest models do not really show a lot of emphasis on that occurring. I'm showing you the European rendition here. The latest GFS model that came out kind of really abandoned big-time strengthening that it was showing earlier. So it may go back and forth. There's still several days to watch it, but nonetheless, it looks like increasing rain threat through the Carolinas, maybe a wind threat onshore as well with some coastal erosion, but this doesn't look to be a bona fide hurricane, maybe a depression and maybe a low-end tropical storm, but we'll see how it goes. But it'll definitely increase our rain odds here out in southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina, and then it builds inland, butts up against the Appalachians, and sees a big rain event out towards Charlottesville, and as well as Asheville. All right, that's the latest out in the tropics. We've got landfalling Francine that'll dissipate in the coming days, and also 7 to watch. That'll become Gordon, and then what happens off the southeast coast. Any questions? You can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, and also on TikTok. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.